What are we doing in the black community? The number one consumer of a Mercedes-Benz
Who's us?
us. The number one consumer of a Gucci and a Louis Vuitton, us. And they don't even advertise. Why is it that in the black community, we are always the number one consumer, but we're not the number one creators?
So you just said it, the fact that there's consumers and creators. For so long, we assume success based on consumption.
Yes, welcome to Closing the Gap Podcast, the truth about black wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. How you doing today, Wilbert?
Hey, man, I'm blessed and highly favored.
Amen. And we are gathered today on another righteous and holy day to bring the truth about black wealth to you on this podcast. You are tuned in to WATV 94.9 on the FM dial. Also, you're finding us on YouTube at Closing the Gap, the Truth, as well as anywhere that you listen to your streaming podcast. You find us at Closing the Gap Podcast, the truth about black wealth. And today, on this righteous and holy day, we are coming to you and bringing a show entitled The Harvest Mindset. The Harvest Mindset. On last week, we show was entitled Reaping What You Sow, and we talked about some different facets about how to deal with market volatility and how to stay the course when you have your plan. We've been talking all year, Wilbert, about having a plan, sticking with the plan. And last week, that was one of the things we talked about, staying the course. Another thing we talked about in staying the course was keep a long-term perspective in all that you do. Don't allow the volatility to cause you to make a rash decision, an emotional decision based on what's happening in the market. All right. We also talked about avoiding that herd mentality. And what was that? Well, that was about making decisions based on the headlines.
Yes. And
not on the strategy. Right. So those are just a few things that we talked about on last week. Just give you our reminder. And this week, when we're talking about a harvest mindset, you can also rephrase that and say that it's a growth mindset. A harvest mindset is how I pattern my mind and my activities to know that no matter what is going on, that I am going to be able to gain something in the midst of whatever is happening.
Absolutely.
Right. And in this, we're talking about the market. We're talking about investing, right? We're talking about the volatility in the market and what's going on, the ups and the downs. And Wilbur, last week you talked about how in the midst of those ups and downs, you gave the people how the market has still been up. You know, despite what is going on in the news and what you see and what you hear. And that's why last week we were warning the people about not having that herd mentality and not pay attention too much to the headlines so much, but make sure that your decisions are based on the strategy and the plan that you have for your life. So when we talk about this harvest mentality, this harvest mindset, it is reminding us that I am going to gain in the midst of the circumstance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, it's kind of crazy when we talked about, all year long, we've been, writing it down to making the plan, having a plan of action. Most people don't plan to fail, but they do fail to plan. So, we've been pushing and prodding and poking at you all year long.
Yeah.
Make sure you got a plan. And, it goes right in line with what we're talking about today. We're talking about the harvest mindset and talking about last week, reaping what you're sowing. And, you have to have a plan because you have to have a destination, the goal in mind in order to measure your success and know exactly are you on track with doing what you're supposed to be doing. And having a harvest mindset, you got to know, well, when do I take the harvest? There's a time and place when there's a harvest season. But if I'm not actually, if I don't have a plan and a gauge as to when to take the harvest, I never know. And the harvest could go bad. And I see that happen on far too many occasions. People say, well, Mr. Hamilton, what are you talking about? If we don't have a retirement plan and, we did witness some volatility, obviously in the month of April, especially when we entered into a brief bear market where the market was down 20%. Well, I had some people that I talked to that were planning on retiring right around that time frame. And all of a sudden, their portfolios took a 20% hit. So if you're a person that you had $100,000, you was ready to retire, well, now all of a sudden you got $80,000. Well, if you're a person that had $500,000, well, now you got $400,000. That is a big difference in the income you're going to be able to access when it comes time to utilize those funds for retirement purposes. So if they knew that, guess what, they were ready to reap a harvest, so to speak, and retire during that time frame, that means we probably should have been exiting the marketplace prior to that 20% bear market actually happening. So, but if I don't have a plan, I don't know when to take the harvest. So we always talk about, and of course, you know, you hear advisors say all the time, don't worry about it, the market's going to come back, and it did.
Yes.
But losing too much at the wrong point in time, it may not be any coming back from, or you have to hope you got time on your side to wait for it to come back. Now, thankfully, the market recovered quickly this time, but there have been other times throughout history where it didn't recover as fast. This is why it's important to have a plan and actually monitor that plan and actually know when it's time to actually take your harvest.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so even with that, we like to, always base our show on scripture. And I want to use the same one that we used last week in Galatians chapter 6 and 9 that says, let us not grow weary in well doing, for at the proper time you will reap if you don't faint. And what you just stated deals with that you will reap a harvest at the proper time.
Absolutely.
Right? It's all about timing. We talked about that in a few shows as well, about timing and understanding. And so we're not talking about timing the market, so to speak, but what time frame is guiding your plan? What do you have planned, and how are you communicating that with your financial plan and with your financial advisor? It's very important to stay in constant contact with the one that has the knowledge about what's going on in the market and understands the upturns and the downturns and understands what's going forward, and that takes the time and does that research. I was, sometimes I listen to some other podcasts as well, and different ones, and, and then watching the news and seeing different things. And one thing I heard was these other guys were talking about some investing, and they were saying that, hey, they recommend that, okay, if there's a person that understands and has the time to read and study markets, that yes, you can take matters into your own hand. But they gave an example, and they said, hey, well, look, if you're a person that is out there and you work on a boat dock, consistently, and that's your job, and that's the way that you make money. They said 9 times out of 10, you don't have time to look at a computer. You don't have a time to look at the market. Why? Because your hands are tied. You have tools in your hands. You're working on the boats. You're fixing these boats, and you're taking care of your clients. The same's with me. That's why our relationship is well. Because in my field, I'm behind the barber chair. I'm not on a computer. I don't have time to read and study and pay attention to what's going on with different stocks and bonds and these things. So I have to entrust everything with you and Hamilton Wealth Advisors to get what I need. And so when we talk about time and the proper time, number one, you have to make time to sit down and talk to an advisor. And then also after you make that time, then the advisor will then also make time to check up with you so that we understand what is going on with you in your life and what type of transitions you are in certain phases in your life, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what it talks about. At the proper time, you can reap a harvest. But you have to sow something, and we talked about that as well last week. You have to put something in order to get something out. You have to put something in. If you haven't put a seed in the ground, you can't expect anything to grow. You can't go outside in your backyard looking for watermelons if you haven't planted any seeds for watermelon. Now, the thing is, you can go and buy a watermelon from the farmer's market, right? Because somebody has sown the seed, and you can reap from that harvest. It's going to cost you a little more to buy a watermelon than it is to plant it. And a lot of times that's what's happening with us too, is we don't have the right mindset to get a harvest because we are paying too many different people for bad advice.
Absolutely. Well, paying too many people for bad advice and just not understanding what advice is meant for us in the first place, because we don't have a plan. First and foremost, I got to understand what areas I'm in need of assistance in. Okay. And then who are the experts in that particular field that can provide me that assistance? We haven't identified that. Too many times in our community, we're trying to be a jack of all trades and master of none. And we're working with people that are trying to be jack of all trades and master of none. The same way you lean on me for certain advice, I lean on you to make sure I get a haircut every week. I'm not at home trying to cut my own hair in the mirror. Do I own clippers at home? I do. I've always owned clippers at home if I need to do a little line up on the side and just in case I can't get to the barbershop.
Right.
But I can tell you and count the number of times on one hand I've actually done that. I always say, you know what? I could do this and I could mess it up. Or I can call Eddie and I'll say, you know what? I'd rather pay you a little bit more and pay time and a half to see if you can assist me with this to make sure the job is done right. See, we don't like sometimes to pay a little extra, but paying a little extra a lot of times can get you a little bit more. But we're not used to paying for the professional advice. We want it all for free. Well, can't you just give it to me? Well, can't you just assist me? Well, there's this thing called time value of money. And people that have valuable information, they value that information greater. And they value the time it's going to take them to educate you on something. So if you're not serious about your time and your money, why would I take my valuable time out of my life to go and assist you? It doesn't make any sense. But we expect people to do that at our beck and call. And then when they don't do it, we end up turning to people who are not professionals, who don't value time and don't value money. And unfortunately, that's where 75 to 80% of our community gets their advice from. They're taking advice from a social media influencer, financial guru who has never passed the test, doesn't have any certifications, doesn't have any qualifications, hasn't done any of the things they've actually said they do on their Instagram or social media, haven't accomplished any of those things. They standing in front of somebody else's car.
Right.
They sitting on somebody else's plane. They standing in front of somebody else's real estate development, telling you to join them in seeking help and getting professional recommendation. One thing I can tell you, our government has done is highly regulated the financial field and the financial marketplace. Any person that says they're a licensed financial advisor, you can go and look up in their background as public record. And we've talked about this.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to go and look these things up. You can go to FINRA, you can go to the SEC website. You can type in their name and it will pull up their background and information, their education, what licenses they hold, how long they've held those licenses. Do they have any customer complaints? Do they have any bankruptcies or collections? These are things of public knowledge. People say, well, why do they have all your personal information out there? Well, if I'm giving financial advice, it would behoove me to make sure that I'm in good financial standing first. And it's the public's right to know that, guess what? The person they're working with is in good financial standing. Do you want to take financial advice from someone who's bankrupt? Do you want to take financial advice from someone who doesn't pay their bills? Do you want to take financial advice from someone who has a bunch of collections on their record in their history? Probably not, because that shows a pattern. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you got a collections, because I had one before when I was in college and didn't know anything about it. I had a knee brace from college when I was playing football. And I got out and I started working. I got a job, and next thing I know, I'm trying to buy a car. And they said, "Well, Mr. Adams, you got a collection on your credit file." I'm like, how do I have a collection? I've never had any credit. So how does something get into collections? They said, well, after doing some research and due diligence, they said, well, you had a medical device that went unpaid for. So I didn't know anything about it. I was playing football at UAB at the time, and I'm thinking between the school and the insurance that my parents had for me, everything was covered. But guess what? It fell through the crack. Now, I was able to go get that thing cleared up and taken care of and get that collection item removed. But if you look up the background of a person and you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different collections, that's probably not the person you want to make sure you take your financial advice from. You probably want to steer clear. And if you can't Google the person's background, that is clear indication that they are not licensed and certified, because anybody who is, you will be able to pull up their background and get detailed information on what they do for a living, how often they do for a living, and how long they've been doing it. And most people don't understand it and don't know that. So Unfortunately, we have too many people having the blind lead the blind and chasing that herd mentality like we talked about before. And we have to get away from that to make sure that at some point in time in the future, you can actually have a viable harvest.
Wow, that's good. That's good. So with that, we'll like to pivot there and saying, okay, now when we find out those things, we look at these things, then the key is, what are we learning from these things, right? What are we learning that if we dealt with taking advice from social media influencers, if we have had some collections of our own, and now, you know, we've learned, what did we learn during that time? That's the thing about a harvest mindset, is that if you are in certain seasons in your life, you always want to learn something in that season. As Wilbur just said, he had a collection on his report, right? Then now he's learned about how to handle these types of things. Many of us have lost money with trying to invest on our own or utilizing advice of others and made investments, right? So the key is, what do we learn from that? That's the harvest mindset, is how do you grow in that time? In the midst of market volatility and things that are volatile seasons in our lives, the key is, what do we learn from it, right? What does it reveal about us, right? What does it say about our fear? Do we get scared? Do we just stop investing altogether when we've lost money, right? Or when we've made money, when we've had great harvests, do we pivot away from our plan and become greedy? That's another thing that we have to also consider, is sometimes our plans fail because we pivot away from the plan and get too greedy in the midst of it. We've had some wins, and then now we want to go for the jugular, so to speak. We want to take it all in this moment, right? We don't know how to just continue to walk the walk and talk the talk. But now, because things are going good, we want to take off and run.
Yes.
And what that also shows us and reveals about us is, what kind of faith do we have? You know, if when we are in the midst of a season of a drought, do we have the fear that our seeds will never grow because they just didn't grow now, so we fail to continue to plant? Do we stop investing because the market has had a downturn right now? And well, that tells us that we are allowing fear to govern us more. But if we have faith in the plan that we prayed about, and God has led us to write down, and we have vetted the right financial advisor and gotten a plan together, then we need to stick with that and have faith that if we are planting the seed and we are watering the seed, that the seed will indeed grow at the proper time. We just don't need to give up. And what we need to realize about God too, and hardships that come in our personal lives, that not only financial trials and tribulation, but also our personal trials and tribulations are only here to refine us and redefine us and be able to reveal what our true nature and our character is, right? It teaches us about ourselves. And so that's what we want to have in this harvest. A harvest mindset is not to be a person that becomes a sluggard and does not plant, but you want to go out and you want to plow up the field and you want to reap a harvest. Well, nah, you got to do some planting first. And planting is a hard thing because you have to till the ground. And in this financial market or the financial status and thinking, when we're talking about plowing the ground, is you have to take the time to vet financial advisors. You have to take the time to have the conversations. You have to take the time to sit down and really go through your budget, right? It was hard for me last night. Last night I was, I got some things I got to do financially, and I was sitting down looking at some things, and I was like, man, I started looking at some of the decisions I made recently financially and realized that I'd gotten off track.
Okay.
And I got into a moment about, man, how did I get off track in these last couple of weeks, right? And I was about to beat myself up about it. But then I said, you know what? I'm thankful that I was able to sit down now and see that I'm about to get off, that I got off track for a few weeks before the few weeks turn into a few months.
Yeah.
And the few months turn into a whole year and multiple years, right? So I was able to practice what we are preaching and have a growth mindset, a harvest mindset, and realize that while I'm in this situation, that God is guiding me and God is going to keep me, and I don't just have to continue to stay the course in the midst of what I'm doing and continue to have a harvest mindset, because I've realized that in seasons past, I've let the few weeks turn into a few years.
Yes, sir.
But I've learned from that now and realized that it's okay to put yourself in check and allow yourself to grow in the midst of that check. So we're going to go to break, and then we're going to come back and kind of dig in a little more about talking about what is the harvest for us. See you after this commercial. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I'm your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And we're going to continue the conversation talking about the harvest mindset. As we closed out in this last segment, we was talking about, the mindset and checking ourselves and realizing that, taking the time to reflect on where we are and realizing that volatile seasons really reveal our true character. Volatile seasons tell us more about ourselves, and it lets us know, have we been reacting emotionally in the decision that we're making? Have we been ignoring the plans that we have? Are we chasing quick wins, or are we staying the course and staying patient and diligent to what we've already laid out? I shared a story a moment ago about how I was reviewing my finances and realizing that I've gotten off track for a couple of weeks, but I'm thankful that I have to utilize even what we prepare for, Wilbert, in having a harvest mindset, a growth mindset, to realize that, hey, okay, yes, you've gotten off track. But as I saw that I was getting off track, had gotten off track, it reminded me of how I had gotten off track in the past and how long I avoided getting back on the right path. And I've even done that sometimes in my spiritual life, where I have been in a good communing with God and praying, and God answering my prayers, and God opening doors that I didn't even knock on, and God bringing opportunities to me that I've been praying for, and just being in the so-called right place at the right time, the divine nature of God putting me in front of the right people in the right places, bringing things to fruition. And in those moments, I've realized in the past that I would get lazy and I would take it for granted, so to speak, that I would wake up on that day and say, okay, yeah, God moved like this, then I know God is going to move again, but failing to realize that I still have to be dedicated. I still have to be disciplined in my prayer life. I still have to be disciplined in my study life, that while God will never leave me nor forsake me, while God will always do what God says God will do, right? God never fails on God's word, but I get complacent. I get comfortable in the blessings that God has. And then when things start tailing off and I'm not seeing the opportunities come, right? I'm not seeing the doors open. I'm having to knock a little harder on the door to get it to open. And then even when knocking, it doesn't open. Then I realize, like, oh, wait, you haven't been in the face of God like you need to. You haven't been disciplined in your walk like you need to. And so now you've created a volatile situation, and the harvest isn't coming because you are not sowing to God like you need to. And so that's the same thing that happens for spiritually happens with us financially,
Yeah.
we have to also check ourselves, right?
Faith without works.
Yeah, faith without works is dead. So are you actually taking the time and staying consistent and sowing your money and investing like you're supposed to consistently? Are you being a good stewardship over what God has allowed you to have is the real question, Will.
Correct. And you know what? And that faith that works is powerful. And I always think about, how faithful God has been, to me in my life. And I always ask myself, have I been as faithful to God as he's been to me? And of course, the answer is always no.
Yeah.
I've never been as faithful to him as I should be, but I used to allow myself to get, beat up over that and feeling undeserving and unworthy of the blessings that I receive from time to time. But then, I've learned I got to pick myself up and dust myself off and say, you know what, Lord, I want to show you I am deserving. I am going to be more faithful. I am going to be more dedicated, and helps me get back on track because, I think sometimes we can allow the devil to beat us down and take away, our hope from time to time. And we get, vision can get blurred and get a little cloudy, and we feel like God is so far away from us when he's really right there next to us. And all we got to do is just reach out and grab his hand and say, and he's begging for you to come back to him, just call out to him, to reestablish, that connection that is always there.
Yeah.
It's just, we're not seeking that connection because, sometimes we get what they call a little fat and happy. We've gotten a couple blessings and things that are going away a couple times, and all of a sudden we lose sight on what got us to that point and what got us those blessings because we start enjoying, our personal pleasures in the world and, the blessing that he's given us a little bit too much, and we forget what got us there. And I think we've all gone through that to varying degrees and varying levels, and, having to remain, and remaining humble, while receiving those blessings and staying focused, which is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's why the plan is so important, because when you build a plan, we're not building a plan just to accomplish a goal for tomorrow. We're building a plan to accomplish a goal that's going to last a lifetime and last for multiple lifetimes. So it helps me to remember the task is not done. So as great as today might have been, as great as the win was on today, I'm still seeking a bigger win in life. I'm still seeking more. I'm still trying to be a blessing. And yes, I maybe accomplish my personal financial goal, but the goal that I want to accomplish for my kids and my kids' kids, it's not haven't been accomplished. So I still got work to do. So me always having that mindset of, Lord, I want to maximize in and everything you got for me. I want to make sure that I get every ounce of favor that I got in me. I want to get that. I want to give you every ounce of faith that I got in my body. That is the challenge. That is the goal. So that's why, I used to have a spirit of never being content. But then I learned that, the difference between being content and complacent. And no, I've learned to be content where I used to not be content with what God has blessed me with.
Okay.
I'm content, but I'm never complacent. So I think too many times we get those mixed up and we become complacent with God. We've gotten certain things and now we're taking it for granted. And the same way God gave it, he can take it away. And every now that he takes it away just to show us and remind us to get our attention, not as punishment,
Right.
but just to get our attention and just be a reminder of, look, the same way it came, it can leave just as fast.
Yeah.
Easy come, easy go. And that's why a lot of times God takes us through things and we go through the storm and he makes us have to learn the whole process of planting the seed into harvesting the ground. So we got to learn how to plow. You got to water. You got to fertilize. You got to do all these things before you can plant the seed, you got to prepare the ground. And that's the work. That's the sweat. That's the dedication. That's the, me remembering those days down in Pine Hill, Alabama, when my mama had been picking peas and shucking corn. And I'm like, man, it's hot out here. I don't want to be out here in this field too much longer. But in order to get that good, beautiful, ripe watermelon out the ground and take it home and enjoy it, that ground had to be prepared and them seeds had to be planted. And then even the process of gathering them watermelons.
Yeah.
What's the work?
Yeah.
You know, all to get home and look forward to enjoying the bite of that sweet watermelon. There was a process, and we have to learn to fall in love with the process, not the reward, because the gift is actually in the journey. The gift is in what we learn about ourselves and what we learn about God on the way to the harvest. So I think if we can learn to establish that connection and strengthen that relationship, I think that gives us something intuitively and gives us a reassurance of, regardless of how things are going, we know how good God is, and we know that everything has a purpose and everything has a season. And usually we plant in one season and we harvest in another. So that means we got to go through some rain to get to some sunshine.
That's right.
So understanding that, it now prepares me so I can count it all joy in good times and in bad, knowing that that sun is going to shine, that I'm going to reap a harvest when it's God's time to reap that harvest. And the great thing about God is that he gives us free will, and he gives us the ability to plan in accordance with what the gifts and knowledge that he's given us. So now we can almost predict our success to a certain extent. We may not know exactly the day I arrive at that number that I need to retire, but we can approximate the time frame in which we will arrive there. So I may not can tell you it's going to be, June 21st, 2025. That's going to be the day you reach the amount of money you're going to need to retire. But I can tell you that based in the summer of 2025, we should be reaching our goal based on that. Well, that's a close enough approximation for me, but if I haven't been planning and preparing, and I haven't been disciplined and putting that harvest aside and sowing those seeds into the ground, well, guess what? How can I expect to have a harvest if I haven't done what it takes to actually receive one? So that's where, we got to take that personal accountability, and we have to be right with him, because being right with him helps us plan and prepare and keeps us on track. Because the biggest thing that I hope the listening audience caught was that when you felt yourself get off track, you were able to recenter yourself. You were able to, because of the relationship that you have with God, and by talking to him and him talking to you, to let you know, hey, Ed, you're a little bit off track. Check that plan one more time. You may not be where you want to be right now, but you ain't at where you was. And I don't want you to go back to where you was. So catch yourself right now so we can make the necessary adjustment and get back on track, because delayed is not denied.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And that takes, like you said too, patient with yourself, thinking you don't deserve, right? Which we don't, but God is so gracious to give unto us. And that's how we're able to reap if we don't faint, is because we're not trusting in our own selves, our own righteousness, or thinking that we are so smart. And sometimes that's what gets us off, and why we don't have a growth mindset and a harvest mentality, is because we think that it's us that's doing these things. We think that we can time the market. We think that we are the smartest investors. Like when I talk to you, you don't try to say like, hey, I know it all, right? Like, no, you are confident in your training and what you are able to do, but your confidence is centered on who allowed you to be here, who has made you who you are, right? That, yeah, I'm confident that I can take care of your finances better than a lot of other people can, or not even so in comparison, but just the fact that I am fulfilling the mission that God has called me to. So being patient with yourself and being patient with myself. And we also want our listeners to be patient with yourselves, right? Now, don't be patient if you're not putting in any work. Don't be patient if you're being a sluggard and you're not planting the seed. Don't be patient if you have not written a plan. Don't be patient if you have not committed yourself to a disciplined life to serve God through Jesus Christ. Don't be patient there, right? You need to hurry up and get to doing those things. Now, it takes some time to write out the plan. It takes some time to put it all together, but you do need to move swiftly to get these things done. And if you've been listening to us, from the start, then you will be working on these things if you have not already done them. But we want you to move forward in that. But being patient, it means that you're not trying to force an outcome. You're staying steady in what you already know needs to be done, right? This is why we're using these farming metaphors, because number one, they're in the Bible. The Bible gives us this. As I said, Galatians 6:9 is our base scripture. It talks about, reaping, sowing, proper time, right? This is what God gives us in the scripture. That's why we're using these things. But patience is the key, number one. Don't try to force anything. Don't try to do things too quickly, but understand how to walk through the process that needs to be done. But in doing that process, then there comes this word diligence, right? And diligence is synonymous to having discipline.
Yes.
Right. And to be diligent means that I'm not in a rush, but I'm going to be consistent in what I do. And that's the challenge for most anybody in anything in life is how consistent are you going to put in the work? How disciplined are you going to do what needs to be done? Right? Beginning of the year, I'm sure many of our listeners, they made some resolutions at the beginning of the year. Some of them have joined the gym, and I guarantee you they can look at, that the money has come out of their account for the gym membership more times than they have actually went to the gym.
Hey,
right?
Let's say I know about it.
And I have been there myself, right? So this is the time to take the time and look in the mirror and say, okay, am I going to have a harvest mindset that while I'm sowing money into the gym to work out, now all I need to do to get in shape is now go to the field, which is the gym. I paid for it. It's mine. I have full access there. And it has everything that I need to get healthy, to get in shape. Whatever my goal is, whether it's to gain muscle, whether it's to lose some pounds, whether it's to get my aesthetic look better, right? Whatever the case may be, whether I have high blood pressure, diabetes, whatever the case is, I have a gym membership that will assist me to get into whatever type of shape I want to. And all I have to do is go there because I planted the seed and I pay my dues there. So that's what we have to do is be disciplined to go ahead and do it. Block out all the outside noise, stick to our plan. Don't let anybody divert us from being disciplined. I want everybody to get that. Don't allow anybody to divert you from your discipline. All right. Stay diligent in what you need to do. Secondly, you have to be faithful to it, right? That now I paid for the gym. Now I start going to the gym here and there. Now am I going to be faithful to it, right? Meaning that what I have already, how consistent am I going to be with it? Taking care of and managing what I have. This is also deals with our finances. Is God has blessed us with a certain amount of finances, and too many times we have our mindset on, I need more, that I'm not able to do X, Y, Z because I don't have enough. Well, you have enough. You just have to be faithful with what you have. The body you have, the money you have, the size of faith of a mustard seed, that's all you need to believe in God and trust and have, and know that you will be able to have a harvest that you will reap if you don't think at the proper time. That's all you need. All you need is you, and all you need is God. And then God will lead and guide you to acquire everything else that is necessary. But too many times we sit back and we feel like we are not enough and we don't have enough. And therefore we don't go out and sow, and we don't go out and do what we need to do, right? We feel like we need more. It's always more. And this is why you have to block out that herd mentality that we talked about last week. the headlines and what's going on social media and what's going on in the news and what's going on in your neighborhood. All of those things are distractions that Satan uses to steal, kill, and destroy the plan that God has for you, the profitable plan that God has for you to be able to grow and to be able to have more and to do more with what God has already given you, right? God has planted you and you and I as a seed. And I think that's what is key here about a harvest mindset, is understanding that we are seeds of God that God has planted here on the earth, that God is looking for us to grow. God is looking for us to bear fruit and bring something forth. So it's important for us to realize that if we realize that we are seeds, then we won't mind planting seeds to grow, because why? We understand that we are growing for the goodness of God. Absolutely. And then everything that God has given us, we then in sense grow it as well. Mm-hmm. So that in turn will give us, if we keep that type of harvest mindset, that will help us have a spirit of gratitude, knowing that God is the one, as Deuteronomy 8:18 says, remember the Lord thy God, for it is he that giveth you the power to get wealth. He is the one that establishes his covenant that he sware by his fathers to you this day. So understand that. Remember God. Know that God is the one that allows you to get well. God is the one that provides good health for you. And that God covenant that he established with our forefathers is the same covenant that we stand on today. And we're going to go to a commercial break, and then we're going to come back and begin and give you some practical action to be able to keep a harvest mindset. See you after this break. Welcome back to Closing the Gap Podcast, Truth About Black Wealth. I am your co-host, Mr. Eddie Richardson, here with our host and owner of Hamilton Wealth Advisors, Mr. Wilbert Hamilton. And we just closed on last segment just talking about what is the harvest and giving you some traits about how to keep the harvest and stay disciplined and diligent in it. And we closed out talking about the gratitude of Deuteronomy 8:18 that acknowledge that God is the source of all that we have. God is the source and the strength of our life. You know, that we need to keep that focus at all times in what we're doing. And so the question for our listeners is, where are you in your financial season? Where are you in your spiritual season? Are you sowing? If you are, continue to sow and you'll reap a harvest. Are you tending to what you have sown? Are you taking care of it? Or are you in the season of reaping? And it doesn't matter which one of those seasons you are in. You just need to be able to identify which season you are in and be patient in whatever season you are in, because your season is different from my season. Mm-hmm. My season is different from Wilber's seasons. Everybody has a different season. So make sure that you stay focused on God to know what season that you are in. So we want to go and give the people some practical actions, take long-term steps to this harvest mindset and this strategy that we're moving forward with financially. So how, from your vantage point, as our wealth manager, right, as our wealth advisor, financial advisor, what keys would you begin to give us to be able to stay in a harvest mindset?
Well, no, I think the biggest thing that you said is, first and foremost, knowing that we're all seeds planted by God. And God, of course, doesn't plant anything he don't want to bring the harvest. Mm-hmm. So for me, I have a personal motto that I tell people all the time. I say, look, if I ain't growing, I'm going. Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing you got to do is assess your situation and see, are you growing? Mm-hmm. And when it comes out simply and plain, when it comes to your finances, we have to take a self-check and a self-assessment and see, is your 401k growing properly? Mm-hmm. At what rate should it be growing? Mm-hmm. Are you the investments that you're doing on your own? If you're doing the investments on your own, are they growing? Mm-hmm. Have you had an assessment done to actually see, are they growing at the proper rate? And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do is just identifying where we are. I mean, too many people on a day-to-day basis that walk through my doors and that sit down and tell me, Mr. Hamilton, I did good. I made money last year. I'm like, well, everybody that was invested in the market pretty much made money last year. I said, well, tell me, how much money did you make? And when we do the assessment of it, they say, oh, Mr. Hamilton, I made 12% last year. And in my portfolio, I'm like, well, the market was up 24%. So yes, you made money, but did you make what you should have made? Especially when we take a deeper look and see, based on the risk that you were taking, did you get enough reward for that amount of risk? See, that's where people need the actual true assessment and need the help of actually trained professionals, because they'll be in the market and they'll be investing and they'll see a return on the investment, but not being able to identify and understand, did you reap the rewards you should have gotten based on the risk that you're taking? Because every portfolio, there's a risk reward scenario, and my job as advisor, I tell people, I want to reduce your risk while maximizing your returns. So you just looking at the returns. I'm looking at the kind of volatility you're going to have while trying to accomplish those returns. So if I can eliminate some of that volatility and remove some of that risk and still maintain the gains and the growth inside of that portfolio, that's a much smoother ride that we're going to take. So I want to be in a situation where we have some consistency, where we are constantly on the incline, not having dramatic swings back and forth. But if you don't have an actual assessment done, a lot of times people have the misconception of thinking they have to ride this roller coaster. Well, no, you're riding the roller coaster because you don't have another vehicle that you can get off of and get into. I have multiple vehicles at my disposal, so I can actually put you in something that may give you a smoother ride, manage to get you to your destination a little bit faster. See, you stuck in a V6, but I got a V8 and a V12. I got air suspension. You stuck with that old school suspension. It hadn't been upgraded just yet. So what I have at my disposal can provide you a more comfortable, pleasurable experience while taking the same ride that, guess what, we all have to take when it comes to the investment world. Yes, we're all going to experience some good and some bad. But how much of that good and that bad are you experiencing? When you do an assessment, and most people don't do an assessment often enough on their 401k, and they'll say, well, Mr. Hamilton, my 401k has grown great. I said, well, have we just take a look at that? Now, how about we take out the money that you put in there and the money your company matched, and let's see what the actual growth of your portfolio is then. And then you'll see that, guess what? Maybe you haven't been doing such an amazing job of managing that 401k. The reason why is because you had this illusion that it was growth, but really it was your contributions. You putting the money in was causing it to grow. You getting a matching contribution from your employer was the result of doing and having that job at that employer. So you seeing that account growing, thinking that, well, the market is doing great. I'm doing a great job investing my money, when in reality, those are just the contributions that's inflating the overall value of the portfolio. Now, that's great because you're putting something in and you're getting a matching contribution, but we still have to have an assessment done to actually see and gauge what are the returns on your investment. When was the last time you changed the return, the actual allocation of your investment? So, but we have to do this and have to do that assessment first. Okay. And like we talked about earlier, you got to plow that field first before you plant them seeds. You can't just throw them seeds out in the ground. You got to make sure you plant and till that ground, and then you got to plant the seed and water it. Well, at what point in time are you pulling those weeds? At what point in time are you actually watering that ground in your 401k? Are you doing everything that you can possibly do to make sure that your retirement 401k or investments are successful? If you're not seeking that professional help, getting a professional assessment, then you're doing yourself a disservice. I don't know anyone that's under the sound of my voice right now that wants to have less money in their account and not have more money in their account. We all do. I mean, if you don't, please feel free to bring it to me, because I would love to have more money in my account. I have 3 sons that love to eat, that love to shop, that love to travel. And guess what? All contributions are welcome. So I can save as much money as I possibly can and increase the overall value of my own portfolio. So we want everybody to be in a situation where they're increasing the overall value of their portfolio But it starts with that self-assessment and that self-check. And then the next step obviously is a rebalance.
Okay.
Because we know the market is changing. We know the market is fluctuating. We know we have a current administration that moves like the wind. You know, frequently in different directions from time to time. So we know things are swaying back and forth and things are not steady. But we can place our feet on solid ground if we're doing an assessment, if we're getting a rebalance, and we can see what changes to the allocations we need to make, what differences in the percentages based on what sectors of the market we need to be involved in, what areas of the economy are growing and thriving. You know, we can see these things. Right now, I saw that actual mortgage rates have hit a high.
Yeah.
They're going up. So that means real estate is going to be moving slower and slower. So should you have a large portion of your investment portfolio tied up in real estate investments? Probably not. The commercial real estate market is not doing amazing right now. A lot of companies have had to let go of space because they're downsizing.
That's correct.
They had already downsized before when COVID hit and never brought people back into the office place fully. Now they're having to make readjustments because inflation is up, but profitability is down. So guess what? I don't want to put as much money into paying for more office space. So guess what? That means that the number of commercial real estate investments is open and at an all-time high. But guess what? If I'm downsizing my company, I don't need more space.
Yeah.
So those places are going to be vacant. Those places are going to be open. So how does that affect my investment portfolio? Are you heavily invested in those areas? So having that assessment and that self-check to understand how often you need to rebalance, because we all have to recenter our life from time to time. We all have to unplug. And every now and then I do a detox. I try to do a juice cleanse at least once a month. Why? Because I need to do a detox and just unplug every now and then and just reset things and get my feet back on solid ground. And like we talked about earlier, just reset my equilibrium and make sure that I'm where I need to be. And we all have to do that. That's the same thing holds true in our finances, in our portfolio. So while we're doing that, and we've, of course, assessed the current landscape of the marketplace, and we've done a rebalance to make sure that we're exactly where we need to be based on our goals and objectives, and then understand that, do I need to revisit my goals? You know, have my goals changed? Because even a destination changes from time to time.
Right.
You know, where I thought I wanted to be in life is not where I want to be now.
Yeah. Circumstances change.
Exactly.
Volatility changes. Yeah.
And guess what? God's revelation to me also changes because the more I can handle, the more he tends to give me. So that changes my destination. That changes my goal and objective. Where the goal and objective when I was a young man was to make it out of Montgomery, Alabama, and get a college scholarship.
Yeah.
And then the goal was to get a degree. Then the goal was to, while doing that, maybe have a chance to play in the NFL. Well, then the goal was to be, you know, a good father, good husband, you know, have a great job, you know, being able to take care of a family. Now the job is I want to employ and empower people. Well, now the goal is I want to build a legacy and build a company that will last and stand the test of time. These things have all been ongoing, and these things are constantly being revealed to me and where God wants to take me. He couldn't show me that vision when I was 18 to 21.
Right.
It may have overwhelmed me. I wasn't ready for it. But the further I go, the farther I see he wants to take me. But I can't see that if I don't every now and then take a step back and just unplug and then reset. Because like we know, God is not the author of confusion.
That's correct.
You know, so but when I take a step back and I just take my time and talk and pray with him, he lets me know exactly what I need to be doing. And he tells me based on where I need to go, how aggressive I need to be in the market. He lets me know based on some of the things that he wants me to accomplish from a business and professional standpoint. He said, well, you got to be a little bit more liquid now. You have to be prepared to take on more because there's more responsibility that comes with it. That was the same things that come along with our financial plans.
Yeah.
We know that every now and then, as those kids get older, and I just took my son to a football camp yesterday. Well, guess what? I know college is around the corner. So some of those seeds that I planted, it's going to have to come to a harvest because guess what? I may have some tuition I got to pay. So when do I liquidate? Well, that comes along with when I'm doing my reassessment and my rebalance. I'm also assessing those goals and then seeing, am I liquid enough? When do I liquidate? And having a plan to know when it's time to harvest because that's when I liquidate.
Okay.
So at some point in time, all that we're working for and saving for, it has a plan and a purpose.
Yes.
We ain't just saving all this money to have to be a number on the paper. We're saving for a goal and objective, whether it's to pay for a home, whether it's to send your kids to college, whether it's to retire comfortably and never have to go to work again, whether it's to be a blessing to somebody else and pay off somebody else's mortgage, whether it be to make sure you can put food and clothes on the back of someone else and their family. At some point in time, that money still has to be liquidated. So we have to know, when do we win the race? When do we take the harvest? Because until that money is utilized for the purpose that God intended it to be utilized, it hasn't done its proper job yet. And we have to make sure we know, well, how much do I need to have in order to take care of that situation or be able to provide what God has told me he wants me to provide?
Yeah.
I need to know when to harvest, when to liquidate, because these are things that maybe reset. Because now, once I liquidate, I go through the process all over again. I liquidate, I harvest, I replant.
Yeah. Yeah.
I retill.
Yeah.
I replow. I water, and then I harvest again.
Right.
These are cycles of life that are continuous and ongoing. Now, what I'm reaping a harvest for may change.
Yeah.
But the process I got to go through to actually get a harvest always remains
the same. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So what I hear you telling us, Will, but in this financial planning and in this time, as we look at a harvest mindset, is number one, make sure we take a good look at our current financial landscape. Where are we? What are we looking at? What's going on with what we have? Assess where we are. Take a look at the land that we are in. Then once we see that and we see our portfolio where it is, now we have to determine if there are any imbalances in there and where do we need to restructure, rebalance. Okay, I need to, instead of being 20% over here, I need to move from 20% over here to 10% here to being 35% somewhere else, right? Something to that matter. Also, I hear you saying revise our financial goals if necessary, right? Once we rebalance ourselves, we may have to revise our financial goals because, as you just stated, you know, that the plan that God showed you when you were 18, that now being in your 40s, what God is showing you is different.
Absolutely.
What was good for the 18-year-old Wilbert is not the same as was needed and necessary for the 40-year-old Wilbert Hamilton. So that's also what we have to take in mind, that there may be some revisions, but yet the same mindset applies, is what I hear you saying, that the mindset doesn't change and God doesn't change, nor does the way that we gain the harvest change, because the key is being in the market. The key is being invested. The key is being disciplined in that investment. And then in that time frame, then we know when we need to take some money out.
Absolutely.
And how much to put back in, and vice versa. So that's good. I like that. Those are some actionable steps that we can take. And then, so with that, Wilbur, before we move to closing, can we talk about some long-term disciplines that we need to have? What are some keys that we can give the people as we prepare to close out for them?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, we talk about it all the time. Consistently doing the right thing over a long period of time is what gives you success.
Okay.
Consistency. And I'm always preaching consistency because consistency goes hand in hand with time. Time is the biggest factor in making money. It ain't how much money you put away. It's how long do you have that money in there to grow while you put it away. Consistently putting away a small amount over a long period of time will far exceed somebody putting away a larger amount over a short period of time. You can start, and we've all heard the stories of if you save $100, $200 from the time you're 20 years of age to you 65, if you invest it consistently in some type of, just say, index fund, S&P 500 index fund or whatnot, you'll probably be close to a millionaire by that time if you consistently invested $200 a month over the next 35 to 40 years. You could be there because of the consistency and what they call compound growth. You know, compound growth, Albert Einstein says, the eighth wonder of the world. If you're getting it, you know about it. If you don't, you're not getting it. And we want to make sure that you're getting it because the power of compound growth is real. But you have to be participating in some type of growth in the market in order to receive it. So biggest thing is, you know, consistently putting some money away on a day-to-day, month-to-month, week-to-week, year-to-year basis, which equates to what we call dollar cost averaging.
Okay.
You know, being able to consistently put it in. So if you have a weekly goal or a monthly goal of putting in X amount of dollars, the thought behind it is, of course, you're buying in throughout the course of time, in good times and bad times. And the average of that brings down the overall cost that you're buying into when it comes to the market. So now you're buying a lot more from a shares of a company standpoint, as say mutual funds, ETF, stocks, whatever it is you're buying it at a lower cost over time. And of course, the catch to the market is always buy low, sell high. So if I'm consistently putting money in and I'm consistently on an average buying in at a lower level, but my money is compounding on the growth that the market is having over time, that means I've bought low and now I'm reaping the harvest of the market growing and perpetual, you know, selling of at the highs when I actually reap the harvest, so to speak. So consistently doing that, along with what we talked about, that annual review, that quarterly review of just assessing your overall plan and development, which leads into your state and your legacy planning. I tell people all the time, if you haven't planned for retirement, you won't have an estate plan or a legacy. You can't have one without the other. We got too many people want to talk about trust and wills, but don't want to handle their bills. If you ain't handling the bills, there won't be no trust and will to talk about. And we going to close right there for the day because accountability is the key to success. And if you ain't got accountability in your life, you need to talk to the Lord, get on your knees and pray to bring somebody into your life to hold you accountable. Because guess what? I've been blessed to have somebody right next to me. Keep me accountable every day. See you next time.